Good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome. As an opening question I would ask, we all have moments they call serendipity, where you meet somebody who you never physically met before, but there's something about them that you recognize. Or places we travel to, and we seem to be familiar, comfortable with that place. And sometimes the other way around, where you come to a situation where you're not comfortable at all for no particular reason. So does this happen to anybody? Any of the above? And we have many different mysteries that take place in a person's life, in encounters and interactions. So being people that initially begin our lives with seeing things on a surface level, and only as we intelligently probe and explore do we come to realize that there are forces at work beneath the surface. So at some point you wonder what dominates, what is really the controlling force? Is it what's on the surface level or those underlying forces? So simply like on a psychological level, it's very clear. You don't have to have a doctorate in psychology to know that human behavior, especially in more what's called pressured situations, extreme or traumatic situations, the reactions that we have in different predicaments are a result of underlying forces that are not visible until that moment of crisis or trauma or challenge takes place. Why, for instance, some people panic in certain situations, other people are very calm. Why some people have fear and others don't. Why we react certain ways. Someone confronts you or someone says something that may be disturbing, even if they didn't mean it. Some people react with rage and immediately reciprocate. Others are more relaxed, more reflective. So there are many examples of human behavior, and almost on a daily basis, that clearly indicate that there are forces that we cannot see that shape our behavior. So what I'm saying is pretty basic. What's not so basic, however, is what are those forces? And can we identify them when, by their definition, they're invisible, even to ourselves? And sometimes we don't even know what we're capable of. And I say this both the good and the negative. In situations, suddenly you're under pressure, and it brings out excellence from you. Strengths you may not have known you had. Like the story with the tea bag. They say a woman's like a tea bag, you don't know how strong she is until you put her into hot water. And a man, when you put him into hot water, yells that it's hot. That's the second half of the, I know it's somewhat of a sexist statement, but since there are more women in this room than men, I guess it's politically correct. Online, I don't know what's happening. And then, of course, there are situations that bring out the worst in us. And generally, things that are not the norm, anything that's a little different than your regular routine and schedule, is going to either bring out the best in you or the worst in you. So we get stuck in that type of rut of the routine, where there's no need for us to excel or to be desperate. So we just go through the motions. But when a situation is particularly challenging, and whatever that may be, it can be a loss, God forbid, it can be some type of setback, it can be many different ways that something that was not the written script that you were expecting, and the spontaneous reaction you will tell you a lot about yourself. And collectively, those moments give you somewhat of a snapshot of what you're called the invisible, the unconscious is like. Which of course is impacted by many factors, above all, our childhood. Because our childhoods are defined mostly of how we're going to react to things. It doesn't mean we're condemned by our childhoods, but it definitely means we're shaped by them. And then the question is, what kind of childhood? Was it a healthy environment? I mean, some experts say that a person's life can be defined by the first 18 months of how much they were held and nurtured. First 18 months, a year and a half. And a person who's been nurtured and held, physically held, will find it easier to bond, to create commitments, healthier relationships. A person that has not been held, definitely if it was worse than that, the opposite of being held, then that person will find it more difficult. Now the logic is pretty obvious, because those early impressions affect us in how we trust, how we believe in ourselves, are we deserving of someone to hold us and embrace us, and all the other factors that come into play in relationships. This doesn't mean, especially from a Torah perspective, that one is doomed. It simply means that that's the challenge one has. And if you recognize it and you rise to the occasion, you can overcome even that. Of course, it's easier if everything works well. But at 18 months, most of us are not in control of our lives. I would say all of us are not in control. So as we turn into adults, it's often those early childhood formative experiences that shape us. But it's not only that, there's other factors as well. There's factors even in adult life. When you've been hurt enough times, you also will avoid that situation. If your trust was breached, if your trust was betrayed, you will the next time be more careful. And we have all our defense mechanisms that develop as a result of our life experiences. And of course, cannot neglect to mention genetic elements, things we inherit. Now, it's sometimes hard to know what we've inherited, and as opposed to what is nurture versus nature, because often things we pick up in our early childhood are attitudes that are not necessarily inherited, but that's what we were exposed to. And then, of course, our educational experiences and our schooling and friends and social pressure. I mean, I'm not here to create a whole thorough list of all the factors that shape our lives. Just wanted to open up with a type of introduction to describe that there's all kinds of forces. There's a script beneath the script, meaning beneath the surface of our lives, there's a whole underlying choreography and a whole underlying forces that may not even seem so organized, that shape and are really who we really are. So what we know about ourselves and who we really are is very distant apart, very far apart. It's almost impossible to even know how much you really know. Being that we don't know what we don't know, how can you know what you do know? It's like someone saying, if I don't know 95%, I don't know whether I know 5%, maybe it's more than that. So it really comes down to the intelligent person knows the less you know about something, the more you don't know what you do know either. You don't know how much of it you know. You understand my point? This is not meant to knock knowledge or to in any way undermine our tools. That itself is part of the intelligent journey. To recognize those invisible, the power of those invisible forces, that's what opens you up. People who deny it and say, I have it all figured out, that's the people who will never be able to access that. So in that context, the question I asked about our life experiences, people we meet, and of course, not only casual meetings, but more profound ones, our relationships, when we fall in love with somebody, and it's as if we always knew them, or as if we always meant to be with them. That type of experience, is that real? Is that an illusion? And why some of us don't even ever have that experience and are looking for it. All of this is really answered by one concept, which is really the journey of the soul, which is the theme of tonight's class, which is reincarnation. Reincarnation intrigues people. We love to know about the mysteries. The things we don't know about, that's what we're always intrigued about. Things that we're used to, that are accustomed to, we take for granted. So we're intrigued by the exotica, as it's called, and which is very much a tool that marketing, of course, uses. That you want something you can't have, or you want something that is forbidden, or you want something that is it makes you feel special, because what you have they can't sell you. So we are intrigued by the mysterious, and reincarnation is, of course, one of the big topics people ask about. Have I been here before? Has this life, this soul in my body been here in a previous lifetime? And if so, what shape and form? And how does that impact my life? Now, often people ask this question, I must be honest, really for sensational purposes. In a way, some people feel, I guess it's the same type of thing going to a psychic or looking at a crystal ball, that if I find out that I was in a previous life so-and-so and so, or such and such, that may explain why I behave so-and-so. It's almost like a cop-out. Like, maybe I'm restless because maybe in previous lifetime I was a frog. And frogs just don't stay in one place too long. So, from that perspective, obviously, it's critical to point out before we go into the discussion that in Judaism, sensationalism is not equivalent and not synonymous with spirituality. The spiritual journey is a very responsible and mature journey. It's not about magic tricks. It's not about, I'm going to find out the secrets. The people who really know the secrets stand in awe of them and always respect their mystique and don't want to own the mystery. They want to be able to experience it, and they know to experience it has to happen with humility and responsibility. Which is why every time I give a talk or class about Kabbalah, I always begin my opening statement. Those that say in Kabbalah, they say, those that say don't know, and those that know don't say. Which of course puts us in a bind here. That means anything one says will be used against them in the sense where if you say that means you don't know. So the truth is, there's another expression from the Talmud that says, you reveal 1 inch and you conceal 2. That's what a wise person does. The most intelligent people that you'll meet are people you'll learn more from what they didn't say from what they did say. And that sometimes takes time. As the seed is planted, you discover that in time. So it's like on a page, the white space on a page is double the amount of the actual letters. Contrast. So, as a disclaimer, or I guess qualification before I begin to talk about this topic, it's critical to point out that the discussions of reincarnation and the soul's journey in previous lives, and in general, where does the soul go to and where does it come from, and so on, is really all about the responsible journey. It's about how we can improve our lives in the process, how it can help us be more sensitive people, more sensitive to others. And as you'll discover, in a way, when you let go and don't try to master the mystery, that's when it begins to emerge in your life. And that's a key word, emergence. Real things emerge in your life. You can't acquire them. You can acquire material things. You can go buy a loaf of bread, a bottle of soda, another piece of food. Are there any other foods in the world? Yeah, there are a few more. You can acquire clothing. You can acquire commodities. You cannot acquire love, and you cannot acquire truth, and you cannot acquire God, and you can't acquire soulfulness. You can't acquire sensitivity. You can learn tools, but you can't buy it. You can't. There's no transaction. No one can sell it to you because no one owns it. So it means it's inside of you, and it's waiting to emerge. For it to emerge, you have to do the exact opposite of acquisition. You have to let go. By letting go, it emerges. So some things you go and get them. Some things you cut everything away and it emerges. A gardener does not create flowers. Even the seed doesn't create flowers. There's something in the earth. You take that same seed and you put it on a table. It won't develop into a flower. There's something in the earth, some mysterious power, that when you plant a seed and you water it, a flower will emerge. Each of us is a quintessential flower, a musical note, a soul, and waiting to emerge in a material world that often works hard at suppressing our potential. So understanding reincarnation and the soul's journey is really understanding the soul and being sensitive to the idea of things emerging as opposed to acquiring it. But even when some people study the Kabbalah, they call it mysticism, soulfulness, they want to study it like they study mathematics, or want to study it like they study other, subjects that help you make money, or help you get something, or help you reach somewhere. And truth is, when you study these type of teachings, you have to use the exact opposite tools. It's not about how much you're going to gain. It's really about letting go and learning how to become invisible. And through becoming invisible, you become most visible. The real you emerges. So the real you basically is threatened by the external you, if you want to put it that way. And as a result, it remains concealed, like a frightened child. A frightened child, when it sees a threatening situation, will hide. And it'll wait to emerge when it's safe. So when we feel safety, when we find trust, when we find love, that's why the real you emerges. Why doesn't it just emerge anywhere? Because It's not ready to emerge. It's not. It recognizes that there are threatening forces. People take advantage of us if we just show, we just let everyone know what we feel or what's going on inside of us. So, with that being said, I should also say that I'd like to dedicate the class, being that today was also Chav Bei Shvat, the 22nd of Shvat. It's also the yard site of my Rebbe's wife, the Rebbetzin, Chaim Mushka, who passed away 24 years ago. 1988. That would be 24. 98, 2008, yes. On this day. So I think it's appropriate discussion about souls. And that's the soul rising. I also want to dedicate it to the yard site of our dear friend, the father of our dear friend Gary Salvant. His name David Aaron Ben Yosef, who's also David Aaron Ben Yosef Yeshua HaKohen, whose yard site is also today, 25th yard site. And on the side of people who are born on the birthday of our good friend, my good friend Ran Agam, on the 23rd of Shvat, which is tomorrow. So, souls. The relevance to this week, and why I decided to discuss it this week, is because you all know every week in the Torah there's a Parshat, there's a chapter. And chapter, 52 weeks in the year, each week has its corresponding chapter. The chapter has lessons and messages to us, as I always often discuss them in this class, which is the relevant personal psychological application of any particular theme in the Parsha. Now, the Torah can be read in many different ways. There's actually 4 levels of interpretation in any particular section of the Torah. Their acronym in Hebrew is Pardes. Pardes means an orchard or a garden. So Pardes is made up of 4 Hebrew letters. Pei, Reish, Dalet, Samach, which is an acronym for Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod. Pshat is the literal interpretation. Remez is the allegorical one, metaphorical one. Drush is the Talmudic, the homiletic, as it's called. And Sod, Samach, is the secret, the esoteric, the mystical interpretation. And there are many different books in the mysticism. Well, I should add before I go there, that these 4 levels of interpretation are not 4 different interpretations, they're 4 layers of one interpretation. So just as I described the conscious and the unconscious, our conscious behavior is a reflection of unconscious forces. So we too are made of layers, so too the Torah, and so too everything in existence is made of layers. What you see in the outer layer, you may see, let's say, a flame. So the naked eye sees a flame. A flame gives off heat, fire, but within there are properties that make this flame a flame. We may not see the properties. There are atoms. There are properties. There are elements, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles. They're all layers of one reality. They're all. Someone say, which one is the flame? The answer is depends which map you look at. You want the physiological map? Here's this. You want the biological map? You want the chemical map? You want the subatomic map? So the same is true with everything in existence. It's raining outside. So the weather report will tell you rain, raincoat, umbrella, or whatever it is you do in the rain. Well, you don't go outside or whatever. Some people melt in the rain. Some people grow in the rain. A meteorologist who knows a little more of the science behind it, and people are intrigued by that. You see on the Weather Channel and all the news reports, will tell you it's about weather, about the pressure systems and different patterns, and low and high pressure systems, and the barometer, and so on and so forth, which create heat and cold and the different conditions, weather conditions. And if you go deeper, there's layers and layers. So the Torah too has 4 layers, within which there are many more layers, but 4 general layers. So if you talk about the esoteric, you're really talking about the inner soul of the pshat, of the literal. So you read it literally, it means what it means literally. But the inner soul is really what it's the full understanding of it. As a matter of fact, like anything in reality, you first begin from the soul and you work outward, from the inside out, not the outside in. But we, living in an outside universe, defined by externals, so we travel from the outside in. So the Zohar begins with, the Parsha begins, Eila mishpatim asher tasim lefneim. These are the laws that you shall tasim, you shall place before them. The commentaries tell you what the pshat is, and then the Torah continues on with laws. These are mostly about the laws of civil laws, areas of property, areas of servants, responsibility to workers and co-workers, employees and employers, litigation, damages, etc., etc. This Parsha actually becomes the basis of a big part of the Talmud, especially in the area of civil law and so on. And especially three tractates, Baba Metzia, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, and Baba Basra, and which becomes the basis of actually constitutional law in the United States and other countries is based very much on Talmudic law, which is based on this chapter. So you have many classic verses in this chapter about, as I said, these areas of ours, basically laws between man and man, not between man and God so much. So that's the literal interpretation. It begins with de-Mishpatim and talks about a person who purchases or leases the use of an individual as a servant, and so on. But when you open up the Zohar, which is the classic Kabbalistic text, the Zohar opens up with these words. The de-Mishpatim, it says the following. This is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai speaking. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is speaking. And what does he say? He says, bear with me, I'm going to read it straight from inside so we have it accurate. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, sorry about that. So I said, these are the laws, or he says, these are the ordinances that you shall place before them. And Rabbi Shimon, this is the beginning of the Zohar of this chapter. The Targum, which is an Aramaic translation of the Bible, of the Torah, translates as these are the judgments that you shall arrange before them. So interesting, instead of Tassim being place, which would be like, presenting laws before, it's arrange. The question is, what does this word arrange mean? What is being arranged here? You could say these are the laws that you teach, these are the laws you shall implement, these are the laws you shall follow. The word arrange immediately implies a deeper meaning. So of course there are many different interpretations, and the Kabbalistic one, the Sod, the esoteric one, goes like this. This refers to the coordination of gilgulim, the order of reincarnation. The Hebrew word for reincarnation is gilgul. If you know some Hebrew, the word wheels comes from galgalim. Galgal is a wheel. So you say something turns, a cycle is a gilgul. So interesting, the word in Hebrew for reincarnation is actually cycles. A cycle. And we'll understand that in a moment. So this refers to the order. So arrange means these are the ordinances, these are the judgments that you shall arrange before them. It's talking about the cycle of the soul's journey, the gilgulim, which are the judgments of the soul that must be reincarnated and return to this world to repair something it may have missed. And then he goes on to interpret the actual opening verses, verse by verse, in this context. How each law, each detail here, is another description of this whole order of cycles. So this Zohar becomes a fundamental text, which is really the first place where you have a text that discusses this matter. Now, here is a few key lines that are, I guess, little eye-catching lines that make this Zohar particularly intriguing and also cryptic. And without full commentary, the commentaries on the Zohar, it would be almost impossible to fully understand the Zohar's meaning. But I'll try to somewhat distill it and explain it in terms that we can all relate to. And above all, as I said, in relevant terms. This isn't just about getting to know what is reincarnation, but also its personal relevance to our lives. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai continues by interpreting the verses, which I'll soon sum up. And he says the following. He says to his circle of disciples, now is the time to reveal a number of closely guarded secrets concerning Gilgul. Which means he emphasizes that this is a closely guarded secret, and now is the time to reveal it. Now mind you, remember the Zohar, after it was written in manuscript form, because Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai lived close to 2,000 years ago, those manuscripts were passed on, but they were hidden. And very few people in each generation had access to them. They were discovered in a cave in two places, in Cremona and Manitoba, Italy. Almost the same period of time In 2 caves, manuscripts were discovered. At the time, no one understood what those were. They were in the 15th century they were discovered. Until they showed them to certain Torah scholars. Not all the Torah scholars either knew what it was, but a few, the big ones, really knew because their teachers had passed on these secrets to them. And when they saw it, one of them exclaimed, he says, he couldn't believe this is the Zohar. The famous Zohar that everyone knew of, but they didn't really have the text. So the Zohar actually was discovered, and then that's when it was published in different versions, different editions. Now, so Reb Shimon, to a circle of disciples, is closely guarded secret. Now, there's another interesting factor in this opening Zohar, which I want to point out, and there's a mysterious man involved that the Zohar only refers to as the Sabha. Sabha means old man, or in Hebrew today we say Sava means grandfather. But the word Sabha really means old man. Actually, in this case, we're talking about a man who's actually described as a donkey driver. And I'll read to you something very interesting soon about how he's misunderstood. And he becomes part of revealing this whole process. So it's called Sabbath de-Mishpatim, actually. It's called the old man of Mishpatim. This is chapter Mishpatim, the old man of Mishpatim, who reveals a big part of these mysteries of the reincarnation, of the cycles, the soul cycles. And he has a dialogue with Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. As Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, the great mystic, reveals these ideas, this Sabbath, this older man, questions him, and it elicits different reactions. And then later, this Sabbath poses to some of the sages cryptic riddles that is misunderstood by one sage, but another sage understands the depth of some of these riddles. And I'll read one to you right now. And I'll just read to you. This is from the Zohar. I continue. I usually don't really go through text, but I hope I'm not boring anybody. I hope this is interesting. Okay. So here we go. One night, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yossi, this is from a little later in the same Zohar that I'm referring to. These are two great sages, arrived simultaneously to a city called Migdal Tzur. They both planned to lodge the night there and were delighted to see each other. This is the Zohar writing. Rabbi Yossi said, "You don't know how happy I am to behold the countenance of the Shekhinah. You don't know how happy I am to see you." Because he saw him, he's a tzaddik, he saw a righteous person, he saw a divine glow on his face. Okay. Why am I happy to see you? For while I was traveling, I was bothered by this old man, a donkey driver, who plied me with questions the entire way. And he begins to repeat some of these questions. The first question he asked me was, what is the snake that flies through the air and goes about all alone with an ant resting between its teeth? He began with union and ended with separation. That was the first. And then he asked me, and what is the eagle that makes her nest in a tree that never was? Her children were stolen away, but not as created beings, for they were created in a place where there is no creation. When they ascend, they descend, and when they descend, they ascend. Two are one, and one is three. It's all clear, right? Okay. And then he finally says the third question. Who is the beautiful maiden without eyes, whose body is concealed and revealed, who comes out in the morning and disappears during the day, who's adorned with ornaments that never were? So let me just, before we get further into this, all these questions he asked me on the way, and it distressed me. This is all Rabbi Chia telling Rabbi Yossi. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yossi saying to Rabbi Chia, that's how I'm happy to see you, because I was pestered by this donkey driver with these ridiculous questions in his mind. It distressed me, but now I can relax. Had we been together, we would have occupied ourselves with Torah discussions instead of other nonsensical matters. That's how I dismissed what this old donkey driver had to say. Remember, a donkey driver is basically equivalent of a cab driver, because that's how you moved around. You rode on a donkey. Okay, Rabbi Chia asked, this old man, do you know anything about him? That's his response he replied, this I know, his chatter is worthless. For had he known anything, that he would have been discussing Torah, and the journey would not have been wasted. Okay? So the lesson immediately is next time you're in a cab and you start hearing stuff like this, you never know what he's really revealing. Rabbi Chia said, is the donkey driver here? Sometimes those apparently empty-headed fellows can turn out to be a golden bell. Here he is preparing for his food for his donkey. They called him over and he came before them. He said to them, now 2 are 3 and 3 are as 1. But Rabbi Yossi still did not grasp the true nature of the old man's comments, and he said to Rabbi Chia, didn't I tell you that all his words are meaningless and idle chatter? The old man sat down before them and said, Rabbis, only recently I became a donkey driver. I was not always a donkey driver. But I have one young son whom I sent to school, and I want him to occupy himself with Torah, and so when I meet a rabbi in my travels, I try to act as his donkey driver. Today I thought I would hear some novel Torah insights, but I heard nothing. Anyway, it goes on to basically describe, I'll read one more, let's see here. So it says like this, Rabbi Yossi said, of all the things I heard you say, only one of them surprised me. You either said it out of foolishness or because you did not know what you were talking about. And what was that? Asked the old man. About the beautiful maiden, etc. The old man began. The Lord is with me, I do not fear. What can man do to me? I am not afraid to reveal the secrets of the Torah. Anyway, and then the old man continues and concludes and says, as a result, I'm not able to judge whether these men are indeed worthy of learning secrets of the Torah. Then it goes on how the Rashbi and Rabbi Chia reveals how this old man is actually a tremendous mystic, and through his riddles, as is usually the case, which he provoked and was attempting to reveal secrets. So why not say them straight out? Why say them in form of riddles? And you find in other disciplines of mysticism, you'll find the same thing, that masters, teachers, will challenge their students with cryptic statements. You can say, why can't you just tell it to me the way it is? Because as I said earlier, it's not about the truth and the information, it's about the humble experiencing to receive it. You're not a receptacle and a container for wisdom until you're humble, or else you will not be able to ever really master it. So you have to let go. And the riddles are meant to essentially challenge you. Because if it was just said to you, okay, here's the information, 1, you may not appreciate it. 2, you wouldn't necessarily get the depth. The depth is hidden and concealed in a riddle. And these riddles force us to think. And then when we see the response and explanation of the riddle, and I'll explain some of them, you recognize the depth of the meaning behind it all. So let's take the one where he spoke about the maiden. What did he mean by that? Okay? So, this is how the commentaries explain. That the maiden, I'll just read it again, right? Remember, there's the beautiful maiden without eyes, whose body is concealed and revealed, who comes out in the morning and disappears during the day, who is adorned with ornaments that never were. He's referring to the soul and his journey. The pure and unsullied neshama is the maiden that has merited to go to paradise as a result of its good deeds. And that's why it's a beautiful maiden. Why is it without eyes? So it's not the maiden who's without eyes, it's we're without eyes. Because you can't see a neshama. You can't see a soul. So if you read it closely, especially in the Aramaic, without eyes, we cannot see a soul. However, the soul, you could also interpret that even on the level of spirituality, you don't need eyes to see it. Because eyes are necessary to see a material existence. Spirituality, eyes do not help seeing the soul or spirit. However, the soul does manifest in this world, we call it clothed in garments. And this level is concealed. What was the expression he used? He says that this maiden, is what? He says like this. Oh, where is it? His body is concealed and revealed. Because once the soul dresses up in a garment, it's concealed because, as I said, we can't see it. But it's revealed because it is now at least in the form of a garment. I'll explain this in a moment. It comes out in the morning because after midnight, toward morning, God descends and all the souls of tzaddikim from the upper dimension are revealed. So that's why he says that last statement says that it comes out in the morning and disappears during the day. Who is adorned with ornaments that never were. The ornaments that never were is because the soul has ornaments, but they're not defined by anything that we in the material world can ever appreciate. So let me explain this in simple English, if I may, okay? The general gist of the Zohar and the relevance to us is the following. The Zohar talks about generally two types of souls. There are souls who come down and remain throughout their lifetimes, called tzaddikim. They do not sin. They have no blemish. And they fulfill their lives, they fulfill the mission for which they were sent here in an untarnished way. They too have a journey, and that journey continues, but it's one type of soul. The other type of soul, which is really more relevant to all of us, is the soul that goes through the wear and tear of life, and we make our share of mistakes, and are blemished. And these two souls are part of a long journey, which is why the whole idea is called cycles, gilgulim. What's a cycle? A cycle means that it's a process. No, we have to train ourselves into seeing life not as fragmented, disjointed pieces, but there's a cycle to everything in life. Everything is a cycle. We, humans, due to our own limited vision, our own laziness, look at things in moments. We see them as particles, when in truth there's a cycle to it all. You look at nature, you see the cycle. Trees, in their own consciousness, surely know that when the winter comes, they shed their leaves, and then they prepare for the cold winter. They go into a form of hibernation. Same with different animals. And then comes the other seasons, which are all part of the cycle when the tree will bloom. And you'll study a tree, you'll see it will always do this. We humans, we get caught up in our moments, and we don't recognize the cycle. Children are different, young children. But as adults, that's what happens. When in truth, if you think about it, I mean, you're watching a film, we all know films are made of frames, but there's a story. The frames are just parts of a big picture. It's harder for us to look at things that way, especially in our fast food generation, where everything is like, I want it and I want it now. Quick. You need patience for a process. A seed you cannot speed up the process. You plant the seed, it's going to take always the same amount of time for it to grow. You could pour as much water as you like in it. You could do what we could do. You could coax it. It's not going to grow faster. And the same thing in everything in nature. We human beings, I would argue that it's also a result of our own insecurities and fears and stuff. We are terrified of losing something. So we lose sight of the process. We lose sight of the cycle. So the first lesson in all reincarnation is the idea that life is a cycle. And yes, your soul is part of a process that began long, long ago. And souls before us, think of it like one long marathon. That is history. And each generation, and each person in each generation, carries the baton for a period of time in this one long marathon. And we are an extension of those that came before us, and preparation for those after us. But what we have to contribute is indispensable. So therefore, the soul's journey is a very sacred journey, and a dignified one, and a critical one, because all of life, all of history, all of existence hangs in the balance. You don't fulfill your little piece in your period of time, in this process, the whole picture is compromised. Which is the reason why we have reincarnation in the first place. Cycles is what I prefer to call it. Because you can call it the spiritual immunity system. That in case a soul comes down to earth and doesn't fulfill everything it had to fulfill, or made a mistake and caused damage, and it leaves this earth, it dies before it could repair and fulfill what it had to fulfill, there is an immunity system. It's not all lost. That soul will return again to repair what it has to repair. And it will do so many times. Which is why when you look at your life is absolutely self-contained. It's your life. You're not just some type of accessory to previous souls. You are a critical component in this whole journey. Because the part that you have to live, your entire life, you must fulfill. And you're fulfilling something that may have not been fulfilled in a previous lifetime. So that's the story with most of our souls. But then there's another soul called the maiden. There's the soul sometimes called here as the only daughter of the king's only daughter. Bas Yechid or Bas Melech, referred to in the Zohar. This is a soul that is unblemished. This is a soul of a tzaddik or a tzidkanis. As a matter of fact, some commentaries say it's actually referring to women's souls who have a different type of certain order when it comes to cycles and reincarnation. But this is in Hasidic and in Kabbalistic Hasidic language. You've heard me speak about Malchus. So you have the 9 spheres: Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and then you have Malchus. In simple English, again, Malchus is dignity. Malchus is the level of the soul that is unblemished. So why does it come down to this earth? It comes down to this earth sometimes to lead, sometimes to be a role model and an example, to help us, let's call it, the more pedestrian souls. I don't like to use that word because every soul is profound and so on, but I mean those souls that are related more to the material part of this universe. They help us to pick ourselves up. These are people who are mentors, our leaders, and so on. That's what a tzaddik. This soul too, however, also has cycles. This soul may return to achieve a purpose, exactly this type of person, leadership purpose. And this soul too has to engage with the material world. So we all have our function. And the critical thing to understand is that that to appreciate your own soul's purpose and soul's mission, you have to be sensitive to the soul. Which is why this old man, the donkey driver, who masqueraded as a donkey driver and seemed like a simple man, or he called even saying, uttering nonsense, essentially really challenged 2 sages and 1 sage in this world to think deeper and to look deeper into existence. Because we are so trapped and so seduced by the material tentacles of this world that it's critical to challenge that perception. So that's why he said to him, all these paradoxes that I was reading before from the Zohar, where he says, the 3 different riddles. To read it again, the beautiful maiden without eyes, whose body is concealed and revealed, comes in the morning and disappears, adorned with ornaments that never wore. You see one common denominator. It's full of paradoxes. And when you read this sentence, it makes you think it doesn't make sense. Beautiful maiden without eyes. Beauty, immediately you think of I see beauty, and now why is it without eyes? Something is concealed is the opposite of being revealed. Something that comes out does not disappear. Something that's adorned is with something that never wore. And the same is true with the other references that he made. I'm just going back to the other one. Let me just get it here. A lot of pages I have here. He says this. He says the snake that flies through the air and goes about all alone began with a union and ended with separation. And then the second riddle: the eagle, makes a nest in a tree that never was. Children stolen, but not as created beings. They were created in a place there is no creation. They ascend when they descend, and they descend when they ascend. 2 are 1, and 1 is 3. So, more specifically, when you talk about this, you're also addressing people's lives as far as our relationships go. We all know the concept of a soulmate. A soulmate is a person that literally means a soulmate. The Torah says The Bible in the beginning says that every soul comes down to this, that in the beginning God created Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve were two parts of one entity, and then He separated them. And that's why we are attracted to each other. That's the secret behind human sexual attraction. Because it's two parts of a soul, or one soul, looking to join, reunite, to rejoin. When a person does not rejoin with their soulmate, the soul has some anguish over it, which is the anguish of not finding your Parshat, as they say, not finding the one that's meant for you. And this immediately refers us to what the souls were like before they came to this place. Were these souls connected before they came to earth? Absolutely. And this is also what this old man is referring to in these paradoxes. He's talking about, you see here, the children, the nest. He's talking about people who are searching for their soulmate. And in that process are not finding it primarily because they're not looking for the soul, they're looking for the body. So, in the focus of this message, he's essentially saying these paradoxes. The paradox ultimately is this: what matters most in life are the things, as I said before, that are invisible. Yet what we value most initially are the things that are absolutely visible. And that's why he uses all these paradoxes to be able to help and provoke, to challenge us. So when you say something, you can see it but you can't see it. It goes up and it goes down. Immediately says there's nothing like that in existence. That's absolutely true. Nothing like that in material existence. In spiritual existence, it's absolutely the case. Ask any married couple, and they'll tell you marriage is a paradox. Actually, they'll identify more with these riddles than with so-called rational prose. What's a paradox? As soon as you have two people who have different attitudes, different backgrounds, strangers, come together, and in a healthy marriage, if it's unhealthy, God forbid, or they break up, then of course, then it didn't work. But in a healthy marriage, it is a miracle, and that's why the Talmud says that it's as difficult to find a match, almost as difficult as parting the sea, because it's like bringing together sea and land. Men and women have very fundamental differences. They need each other, but like the expression goes, you can't live with him, you can't live without him. You can't live with her, you can't live without her. So we need relationships, but they're not easy. They take work. Especially, as I said, in a relationship that's not neglected, that is dynamic, that's growing, work is being invested all the time. Because you have two people who are two adults, and they both treat each other as equals. They each have individuality. So without compromising someone's individuality, how could two individuals, who let's say are fierce, independent souls, come together? That definitely requires some type of, that definitely contains some mystique, some mystery. For that matter, human beings in general are mystery. Betty Friedan wrote the book, The Feminine Mystique. But just for the record, I must tell you, there's also a masculine mystique. Maybe the feminine mystique was underappreciated, with men running the world and the hierarchy, male hierarchy. But regardless, human beings have mystique. And part of a healthy relationship is embracing that mystique. So what this old man, the donkey driver, is doing is challenging, in the most simplistic way, almost like nonsensical riddles, to rethink what life really is about. Is life a paradox, or does life make sense? Albert Einstein, of all people, who you would think, a person who made so much sense of the universe, who understood secrets and mystery of the universe more than anyone, perhaps more than anyone in history on a scientific level, said the following. He said the most, what's the word he used? The most unreasonable part of the universe existence is that it's reasonable. That's what he said. What does this mean? It means that if you really understand existence, you understand nature, science, you can't in any way capture why is it reasonable. You know how many factors you need for things to make sense? It would seem much more logical. It shouldn't make sense. Now I know that doesn't make sense to us because we worship the mind. But this is what he said. The most unreasonable part of existence is that it's reasonable, that it can make sense. Now, Einstein, was discovering God's mind in his way. In the Torah and in Kabbalistic and Hasidic thought, the answer is very simple. God wanted it to make sense. That's why it makes sense. He created it in a way They created intelligent human beings in order for them to understand the intelligence invested in existence. It could have been done in an unintelligent way. Now, if you really think about it, it all does make sense, but also doesn't make sense. For example, you can Google this, check it out. I think it's the bumblebee, or at least some bee or some flying insect, that according to all laws of aerodynamics, that insect should never fly. Its body weight, compared to the flutter and the air pockets, it shouldn't fly. However, as the scientists like to say, the bumblebee never asked scientists whether it should fly or not, and never studied science. If it studied science, it would never fly, because it never would make sense. So a lot of nature that makes sense to us, remember, it makes sense once we see it. And once we understand it, you start realizing there's a wisdom to it all. So the point here is not to suggest there's no reason, but to suggest that reason itself is not necessarily reasonable. The logic itself, if you get to the axioms of what defines logic, is not necessarily logical. That's the way it is. And scientists have a consensus, which is no proof for it, that you always search for the simplest solution to any scientific problem. Ask or read up. There's no proof for that. Maybe it's not the most simple solution. Maybe it's the most complex solution. Maybe something in between. Maybe some have simple solutions, some complex. That's the consensus. It's not provable, but it's accepted by all, that the simplest approach is the one that you look for. And it's never been disproven. So you could always argue, well, maybe there are other explanations. There may be. But the simplest one has always been that consensus. The point I'm making here is that the appreciation of existence and life, and that's essentially what this old man is doing, is challenging the perception of what is up and what is down, and what is valuable and what is precious and what is not, and what is ascending and what is descending, and what is beauty and what is not, and what do we see and what don't we see. And if you don't challenge yourself in this way, you really can never understand your soul and your soul's journey and the soulmates and relationships that you have. So let me give you an example of two scenarios. Very simple scenarios that we all have every day. Tonight, tomorrow, today, but today has passed already, but tomorrow, you'll have certain encounters. You may commute, you'll be in the office, you may be traveling somewhere, whatever it is. You may be taking a walk, you may be going for a coffee, meeting someone for dinner. It doesn't have to be necessarily an interaction with another person, but we'll have many encounters. Some encounters with nature, some encounters with people, some encounters with experiences. Of course, online, there's plenty of encounters, depending how many hours you spend at whatever website, that's Facebook or the others. How do you look at these encounters? Most of us never give it much thought about a bigger picture. These encounters, whatever comes. I'll have different encounters. I'll deal with it as it comes. You may have an appointment tomorrow that you're looking forward to or not looking forward to. You may have certain obligations, expectations, etc. But generally speaking, most encounters, they come your way. That's essentially a person who's traveling on a material journey, and once in a while something emerges. You may meet somebody unexpected, and you'll hear something. You meet someone that really surprises you. But this is not necessarily in our control. What happens, happens. If it's a negative experience, okay, you try to run, what do you call it? You try to go with the punches. Is that the expression? If it's something positive, great. But there's another way of looking at your life experiences. That whatever's going to happen has an underlying script, forces at work that are making that happen. What you do with it is up to you. But every encounter, there's no such thing as just an encounter. That encounter is a spiritual experience waiting to be released, waiting to be actualized. So you may meet somebody who will speak nonsense to you, for example, in this, and you'll just dismiss it. That doesn't mean everyone who speaks nonsense is not speaking nonsense, by the way. But it doesn't mean everyone speaking nonsense is speaking nonsense. Maybe he has something to say to you. Maybe there's a message coming to you. Maybe it's a message that you need to listen to. That's a different way of looking at things. And that's a critical tool to changing your life and improving your life. So if a person's in a rut and says, I've been dating and dating and dating. I can't find my soulmate. At some point you have to ask yourself, if you're honest and want to really get anywhere, if I keep doing what I keep doing, I'm going to keep having the same results. Right? That's what they define insanity, as being someone who does the same thing and expecting different results. So how do you change what you're doing? That doesn't just mean changing what street you walk down. It means fundamentally looking at things differently. What are we looking for when we talk about finding a soulmate? What are we looking for? So we have our standard shopping list. Someone that I found attractive, someone that is chemistry, there's an emotional attraction, can have a conversation, and so on. It's all very nice, but who trained you exactly how to look for a soulmate? Where did you pick up your standards? Well, mostly by osmosis, by things we saw, by things that we keep seeing, what our eyes see, and so on. But what is true beauty? I'm not suggesting a person shouldn't be drawn to someone and want to be drawn to someone that is physically attractive. But how much of that is overshadowing other types of beauty? And what happens if you find that someone can be physically attractive and maybe 10 years from now they may not be so physically attracted? But that person and you can both build something together that will change the universe and generations to come? How many of us think like that? We're not trained to think like that. We don't live in a world that thinks 10 years ahead. Most people say 10 years ahead, most marriages fail. That's, if anything, you think about a prenuptial, what to do, exit strategy. We don't think like that. And the media doesn't support that type of thinking. So, though what we're looking for may be correct on the list, they're all good things, but they're not necessarily the whole picture. So that doesn't matter so much if it's a small thing, which coffee you're going to drink in the morning. But if you're talking about finding a soulmate, an eternal partner in life, you're talking about something serious. You have to really start thinking like a soul thinks. And you need to be provoked. What you consider to be valuable, what you consider to be beautiful. That's not so easy. None of us want to be challenged about our preconceptions, especially in the areas of our emotions. It's one thing, challenge me, I'm going to take a riddle, a quiz for my IQ. There I want to be challenged. But challenge emotionally people don't like to take emotional tests so quickly. You do that when you have no choice, or you do that if you know for sure you're going to have good results. But it's very, very disconcerting to find out that you may be blind about many things and that your emotions are somewhat, let's call it screwed up, is the right word, or so on. So here you have an old man, a donkey driver, that almost would have been completely misunderstood by a great sage. But the other one reminded him, and he challenged him. And in each of these phrases, and again, I'm speaking about it more in a palatable and accessible language. It's more complicated when you read in the Zohar because he talks more details about the different type of souls, and that's what each riddle refers to, another dimension of how souls transmigrate, the cycles. But the bottom line above all is forcing one to think in other type of language and terms. And yes, that's what you want. If your life is working, you definitely want to be challenged to grow even further than you are. And if your life isn't working completely in some areas, even more so you want to be challenged. You want your perceptions to be challenged because you want to be able to say, okay, so how should I look at it? And how should I perceive things? Now, trust me, it's not easy. It's very difficult. But it's a matter of life and death in a way. I'm talking about spiritually speaking. It's about living up to who you can be or not doing so. So, in this context, every one of our souls, therefore, is part of this long journey. But the key thing to remember is that when someone asks the question, okay, so what previous life may I have been? See, as soon as you ask that question, we all are intrigued by that. Most of us are never going to find an answer to that question. And if somebody does give you an answer, especially if they charge you money, you probably know that's not not accurate answer. See, because if we had to know which soul we were in past history, we would be told. The fact that we're not told, but we're told that we're part of a journey, preserves the mystique, preserves the integrity. And embracing the mystique of something is one of the hardest things to do in our so-called, as I said, commodity-driven, acquisition-oriented society. Embracing a mystique means embracing something that's beyond me. And when you do so, you begin to relate to it. And I mentioned before, truth, love, relationships are all part of that journey. So, to continue on there, I want to go back to the thing with the two types of souls. So, each of us are born into this world. Your soul is pure. We say it in the morning. We say every morning, the soul that I have, that you have given me, is pure. Each of us says it. No matter what happened in your life, that soul is pure. And, of course, upon birth, freshly fallen snow is the purest of them all. Before life soils, before we go through the experiences, before losses, disappointments, broken promises, dashed dreams. So a soul has two parts to it, in other words. It always has its purity, that it transcends, in a sense, our life experiences, and even our disappointments and the negative experiences in our lives. And then we have the soul as it manifests in the areas of our lives that are affected by life. So just take any particular example. Let's say you had some type of negative experience a year ago, 2 years ago. Hopefully not more often than that. So to look back at it, at the moment it's harder to see. When you're in a difficult moment, it's harder to see the big picture because you're completely consumed, overwhelmed by the emotions of the moment. But when time passes, a few things can happen. Obviously, you can remain bitter and angry about that. You could forget about it and just become neutral. Or you could remember it, but you learn from it and you've grown through it. All those three options are possible. So it's critical to know the two components that I just said. That number one is that the soul always remains above whatever you've experienced. So your real you, the real identity, your real soul, the inner dimension of your soul, is never really called tarnished by your life experiences. But that's the soul so-called on your inner level. Life experiences, however, can affect your consciousness, your mannerisms, your behaviors, your tools, your body language, and so on. So that too is part of the experience, that the soul has to manifest in that part of the experience. And it manifests, as we know, the soul has 5 levels, as he discusses in the Zohar. There's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. 5 dimensions. Nefesh refers to biological life. That's the soul as it manifests in real life. So that soul is impacted by life experiences. The level of ruach is the emotional life of the soul. That's a little detached. It's an emotional life, but it's a little above the nefesh level, biological level. The next level is, I can't say a little detached, I wouldn't say the word detached, it's a little more transcendent. The next level is neshama, is the intellectual life of the soul. The next is the transcendent level, chaya. And finally the 5th is yechida, the pure, the essence, the oneness of the soul. So, the soul as it manifests in the lower levels means it has to manifest in this world and it will be affected by it. So when a life experience happens, what happens is 2 things can come to, if it's at its best, if you're at your best, you access the deeper part of the soul that's untarnished to help you transcend the difficult experience. And then the soul part that is experiencing the difficult experience, you learn to transform that into a positive one. Someone that remains bitter, it's usually as a result because the experience has taken control of your life. That means it's not just what you experienced, you became it. Like you could have a person who suffered, and you have a sufferer. It's not the same thing. Many of us, all of us in life are going to go through have some setbacks. But do you become defined? Does your identity become defined by your setbacks and by your negative experience? That's the difference between whether your soul's in control or not. So, life has its challenges. As I often mention, a good swimmer is not someone that is always swimming and is so powerful that can swim against the tide or when a storm strikes. What does a good swimmer do? That when the tide is against him or her and there's a storm, he will stop swimming. He'll stop exerting energy and just save his energy, and he'll let himself float with the Go with the flow. Go with the waves. A bad swimmer or someone who's not experienced is going to fight and get exhausted. So when we experience anything in life, if everything's working well, the higher part of the soul reminds you that you have more to life than just what's happening right now. The lower part of the soul goes through the experience, and the higher part informs the lower to learn from this experience. And then a year later, or a time later, you can realize this experience has been a necessary process in my own growth. That's to give you an example. So essentially we have these two forces at work, these two dimensions of the soul all the time at work. And when we do that, the Zora says, God himself illuminates us with many radiations, radiates us with many lights. Which means when a person is able to access that higher part and connect it to their lower part, they in turn get a blessing that gives them the strength to deal with things. Now, implementing this, of course, is easier said than done, but there are methods, there are ways how to do this. I think I've given examples for this in the past. I'll just give one or two examples. The Hasidic expression, when you're tied above, you don't fall below. Which means, when you're grounded and you are connected to something that is a type of strong foundation, so that holds you, keeps you, maintains you when things are challenging. I mentioned that last week we spoke about trees. When the roots are deeply embedded, or in this case I said tied above, actually in Kabbalah it says the roots, the foundation on earth, the foundation is beneath the building. In heaven, the foundation is above the building, because it works from the top down. So the foundation begins Keser, the crown is the foundation, and then it develops into Chachma Bina, into the spherotic structure. So when you're bound above, you don't fall below, means that when you have in your life spiritual commitments, you need to go to a class once a week. You have a partner that you study with, or you go and volunteer. Things that are more powerful than your daily routines. Those things can help and save your life in times of need. So when things are going well, like I said last week, a tree, there's no storm going on. The tree's standing, and you can't tell the difference between one tree and the next. But in a time of a storm, when there's a challenge, those forces that you introduce into your life, those roots tied above, allows you to ride through the storm. I've said this. I've suggested this exercise, plan to quite a number of couples that I was involved and blessed with to be able to either marry off or be part of their marriage. When they come to talking to me, counseling before they get married, I always suggest, the way you start things, that's the way they're going to go. You implement some things at the beginning, it'll always be that way. If you don't do it in the beginning, later it's going to be hard to change your habits. So my suggestion I always say is, no matter what, both of you make time once a week to study together. An hour, Thursday evening, whatever. Make a time, but do it before you get married. Do it right away. Commit to it. Once a month in your home, host something. And I always explain the reason for it is because marriage is going to go through its roller coaster. That's how it is. The more roots you embed into your relationship, the more things that connect you, that transcend your differences, they will withstand some of these challenges. So in times when other things may not be working, this may rise to be able to be like a type of safety net. And I can tell you at least 4 or 5 couples that I personally know told me that the result of doing this saved their marriage. Because when it came to the crisis, a disagreement, something happened or whatever, and they stuck to their commitment, they stuck to it, that itself diffused it. That doesn't mean it just solves all the problems automatically, but it meant that they, essentially what we say in investments, diversified. They diversified. They didn't put all their eggs in one basket. I'm angry, we're not going out to dinner. I'm angry, we're not going to study this week. Why should the study be compromised because we're angry at each other? So things like that can end up holding up a relationship. Obviously, it's not alone, it's not sufficient all on its own, but if you think of it in terms of a formula, it works. And try it out even in your own life. This is, I mentioned relationships. Introduce things into your life that are eternal, soulful. Commit to them, stick to them, and do it in a way. Don't bite off more than you can chew, or else you won't stay committed. It's the small, consistent commitments. Every day a penny in the charity box. Every day a prayer, a little study, whatever the schedule, however you work it out. But do it consistently, and do it precisely not because you need it for work or you need it for some deadline or to satisfy someone. Do it simply for your soul. Because as soon as you're doing it for some reason, okay, then that the reason is really the dominating factor, and when that reason is gone, you'll stop. Do it for the soul's benefit, for your own soul's benefit. You'll see that it'll come back to repay you many times over. So in simple terms, you can say that this Parshat Mishpatim, these are the laws. These are the ordinances. These are the judgments that you shall arrange before them. Well, God is telling Moses essentially, these are the cycles of a soul's journey, and every soul will go through its challenges. But every challenge is meant to bring a person to a greater place. Then there's the part of the soul, or there are those tzaddikim souls. Each one of us has a dimension of that within ourselves. Amach kulam tzaddikim. We all have the Moses within us, etc. The Malchus, that the maiden, that has an element that is above the challenges of our lives. And these two have to learn how to speak to each other. In psychological terminology, they have today the terms the inner child. And there are many disciplines, many therapies based on reconnecting to your inner child. You know, if you really translate that, that's really the words of the inner child is the queen's is the only child of the queen, the princess, the maiden, that is the only child of the king, Bas Melech, Bas Yechida, the only child, the princess. This is an inner child that each one of us has that is untarnished by life's experiences. Yet, there's another dimension of the soul that does manifest itself in life. Nefesh and so on. And as a result, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, that does manifest itself in this material world. And there needs to be, you have to always know that you're always a princess, you're always a queen, always a flower, a musical note, no matter what happens in life. And to know it is one thing, and act on it. So by doing things that speak, that nurture, nourish that dimension of your soul, of Chai Yechidim, that can hold you and can help you, can save you in times when the other parts of the soul fall. So it's like when a person falls, how do you pick yourself up? When you have something inside of you that's stronger, that pushes you to pick yourself up. You don't sink. You dig deeper. And these are things that we build in times of plenty. When things are going well, that's when you build those reinforcements, those reservoirs, because then they're part of your arsenal. And when there's a challenge in life, you have something to lean back on. You have something to turn to. I know people, unfortunately, they put all their eggs in one basket. Whether it was making a lot of money, and then after I make a lot of money, then I'll go build a family and a home and so on. And then when something happened there and they lost, they had nothing to turn to. There was no safety net. There's nothing to turn to. Not just they lost their money, there's not another investment. There was not, at least you go home at night, there's children, there's a family that cares for you and stuff like that. These things are critical. Now, this doesn't mean you have to prepare for the worst. It just means being prudent and intelligent. And frankly, even if one never falls, everything I'm saying is also extremely relevant. Because as they say in Yiddish, if good is besser, nicht besser. If good is better, not better. So even if things are going very well, human beings like to grow. Growth means going further. So this is not just about preventive medicine of avoiding problems. It's also how we can actualize ourselves and push ourselves to reach greater heights. So it comes down to this. Maybe tomorrow or tonight, when you open your eyes, think of what this donkey driver said. Eyes, but you don't see. Or the beauty, but without eyes. So you think about it. Look inside yourself, or look inside another human being. You say, hey, this is a beautiful soul. A beautiful soul. But you cannot see a beautiful soul. So what is exactly experiencing it? And what do you see? We see many things around us. Sometimes very, awesome, magnificent beauty. But it's also important to look for the beautiful souls in our lives, the people that have beauty in them, and everybody has beauty in them. And when you look with such eyes, you'll find beauty you may not have seen another time without looking that way. It's changing how you look at things. You're recognizing if there's beauty in everything, you'll look for it differently. There was a custom in certain armies that before they went to war, they marched out to the first battle, they would sing a march of victory, a victory march. And the question is asked, you haven't even fought one battle. What kind of cockiness is that? You think you know? The answer is it's the confidence. You'll see this before a game. You see it before a real battle. That the leader will give everybody a pep talk and hype them up. It's to elicit the energy, the confidence, the strength. Because confidence is half the battle. You lose confidence, all your competence is worthless. So you can make a bumper sticker out of that, Jeff. Okay, competence without confidence equals incompetence. Okay, so how much is confidence? How much is competence? It's a good question. It's like they asked that guy who made a lot of money. He said, how much of it is seichel? How much of it is mazel? How much of intelligence? How much luck? He said, let's put it this way: it's 95% luck, 5% intelligence. And if it was 100% luck, I'd be a lot wealthier. So competence and confidence is something like, I don't know if it's exact quite proportion ratio. Excuse me. But essentially it's like this. Confidence, you can see the greatest people with great talents, they lose confidence, you can beat them. I remember when I was a camper in camp. So I played chess, I can't say I was some big master. But there was a guy in camp that was extremely good. He was young, but he was a genius. He was a brilliant chess player. And I beat him, not because I'm better than him, because I psyched him out. And I don't remember what I did exactly, but I definitely told him. So he was reading into my moves, some type of depth that wasn't there, and he made a mistake. So it's about sometimes, there was a little deception, I would say. Please don't report that to the authorities. But generally speaking, confidence is a critical component, because confidence breeds confidence. People respond to confidence. So going out with that march of victory is that when you know absolutely that your soul has beauty in it, when you know that people you meet and every experience has some beauty in there, you look at life a different way. And this is what this donkey driver of all people challenged them, how to look at things. Look differently. You want to understand the soul's journey, the soul's cycles? Look differently. Do you think that people who really can perceive and discern the previous lives of a soul's journey are just simply smarter people or prophets? No. They're humbler people. And they have so, what the word I want to use? Unwrapped. They're so, I want to say like declothed themselves. They've so, there's a word I'm looking for in English. It's like so freed themselves from all the garments and from all the traps of our own sensory perceptions that they're able to, ultimately what emerges is the spiritual experience. And you can sense a soul and a soul's journey in a different fashion. So it's about really getting rid of, eliminating all those, like cleansing the doors of perception in Blake's terms. Say disrobing the garments of perception. Yeah, and once that's really what it's about. So we may not be able to achieve quite that type of effort of that type of this whatever word I want to use, but a taste of it, all of us is possible for all of us. And when you look at that, and when you assume that attitude, you look at everything differently. You look at life differently, and new surprising ways. You start seeing opportunities where once you may have disregarded it or seen it as a liability or a challenge. There's opportunities everywhere, but you have that confidence in the soul's inner mission, the soul's transcendent power, the ability for it to not be affected and definitely not trapped and defined by life's experiences. Jews throughout history have suffered, but they never became sufferers. as I mentioned before. We can have an experience, that doesn't mean you have to become the experience. No, if it's a good experience, by all means become it. But we are not a product of our experiences. We're not a victim of circumstances. We are souls on a journey in the material world, and as souls we shall always remain. The only question is, how aware are you of it? How much do you actualize it? How much do you implement of that soul's power into your outer garments? And when you're able to do it, the more you do it by committing yourself to things of that nature, the more it emerges. Simple example, you help somebody, you offer help, people come speak to you and they consult with you, and you give them a little, share something with them. That makes you see things clearer. You start empathizing differently. You start sensing, you're more sensitive to people's needs and interests. Obviously, we all begin the morning with what's called the self-centered life, self-absorbed. Your interests, my interests, whatever they are, and other people fit in if they add to my needs. So if you're ready to give me something, I'll give you something in return. That's nice transactional life, but it's not the way soul functions. That's the way a body functions. The soul doesn't think in those terms. The same body that does not relate to cryptic riddles also doesn't relate to giving, because all it knows about is taking. It's a hoarder. It hoards. Because the material existence is a very insecure one, and if you don't hold on to it, material consciousness states you may disappear. Spirituality doesn't have that problem because it doesn't occupy time and space, so it's fine with it if it disappears. Like he says here, it can be seen and disappear. It disappears, the fact that you don't see it with the naked eye. You think DNA or subatomic particles really care whether you see them or not. They know, they shape all of existence. That's the bottom line. So you see how a certain reality doesn't really takes very seriously our limited myopic vision of what we consider to be valuable or precious or beautiful. Obviously, we don't live on a DNA level. We live on an outer level, but we can create a channel that connects that inner life with our outer life, and that's through technically that's what a mitzvah is about. So de-Mishpatim, these are the judgments that you shall arrange. Also means these are the laws, these are the mitzvahs. So mitzvah means connection. For the cycle of the soul to really continue its journey, it's through connecting. So there's a connection between the literal interpretation of this verse and also the fact that it talks about the laws that govern the soul's journey. Is because if you want to master that soul's journey, you have to fulfill the mishpatim in a technical sense. Because that's what a mitzvah is about. A mitzvah is a physical act that has that is like a switch that creates a spiritual connection. It generates a spiritual connection, just like a switch. But you cannot turn on a light without a physical switch, because we don't live on the level of light. So for there to be a bridge between the two worlds, you need to have a physical switch that creates a connection that in turn generates light. The same as our commitments, the things we do, our mishpatim, the things we do. You make that connection between the material and the spiritual. Then the spiritual is nourished, the spiritual radiates like light, and then the spiritual feeds you back in turn, and you feed its cycle and appreciate its role in our lives. So, is it easy to envision or to imagine tomorrow morning thinking of yourself in a new way? When you wake up, you say, Moda'ani, I acknowledge you for returning my soul. But instead of thinking now, you know what, here's what I have to do with my body. I have to take a shower, I have to eat, and so on. Yeah, do all that. But think of it like this. Your soul is really the driving force, but your body has certain needs. So the soul is saying, okay, let's go take a shower for you. I'm going to take care of you now. Let's feed you. Let's do this, let's that. In other words, try thinking for a moment how the soul, from the soul's perspective, not from your sensations or what your needs are or what you feel. What is the soul thinking? Try that exercise. You'll see it's not going to be easy, but if you could do it for a minute or two, it's a quite fascinating experience. It's like closing your eyes, and many exercises are with breathing. Yeah, breathe from within, and what you feel is the soul force is really where it all begins. But we live on the outside level, so we can only travel from the outside in. The truth is, the perception of the soul is from the inside out. Now, a tzaddik sees everything from the inside out. We see everything from the outside in. But that doesn't mean we can't have a glimpse, and at times climb the mountain and see from the outside in. From the inside out, through connecting to that which is above, which helps us not fall below. So, hopefully this was just a nice taste of the ordinances that govern our cycles, the judgment that arrange the soul's journeys, and we learned a little about a donkey driver and about an old man and the mysteries of that, and hopefully this will, above all, empower each of us to really look at ourselves, look at our lives differently, and especially, as I said, in the area of relationships. If you can align, reprogram maybe how you look at things, maybe that's the thing. First you have to deprogram, then you reprogram. So first you have to, erase your hard drive before you refill it. I can't say erase it at all, that may not be so good, but erase parts of how it works, of the operating system, and upload some new software from the Zohar, Parshat, de-Mishpatim. I'm sure that it'll help us all find new solutions to old problems. So I'm honored to speak to all of you as your soul goes through its cycle and its journeys. Each of you in your own particular trajectory, your own way. And I want to say again that this class is dedicated to a soul of Rebbe Chaim Mushka, passed away 24 years ago, the yahrzeit of the father of Gary Salva, David Aaron Ben Yosef and Yeshua HaKohen, as well, 25 years ago, and the birthday of our good friend Ron Agam. And may all our souls have healthy, many, many healthy years in their journey here on this earth, and above all, to live up to the potential of your soul, and make sure that its cycle is complete. You know, when you're running your leg of the marathon, you want to be the fastest you can be, the most efficient you can be. Obviously, this doesn't mean physically faster, because sometimes you have to go slowly in your journey, or else you miss. You will forget to smell the roses, as they say. And everyone should be blessed in finding their soulmate. Those that need to find that, and to hold on to the soulmates that you have, and build beautiful families. And may we all be that beautiful maiden whose body is concealed and revealed, comes out in the morning and disappears during the day, adorned with ornaments that were never were. It's the combination of the ultimate paradox of the soul's metaphysical invisibility and bridging that with the sensory world, which is tangible and experienced in our senses. The bridging basically the suprasensory with the sensory. So, Philip will be giving his class Thursday tomorrow night. Anyone interested, please call us. We are here in any way to satisfy and help and provide resources for your soul's journey in this material world. So it's a combination of soul and body. And it's an honor to share a few moments with you in this life journey that we all have. And please stay in touch. Leave us your emails in case we have not received them yet, so we can stay in touch. Yes, I've already read that. Thank you. And I bid everyone a very beautiful evening, beautiful morning, afternoon, twilight, wherever and whenever you may be. And this class has been broadcast live, and also can be seen anytime you like after we upload it. So feel free to access it and share it with anyone. The power of transcending time and space. You can get information anywhere, anytime, to anyone. Thank you very much.